All right, so first we're answering a couple questions. Episode 173. Lance just asked if balls get saggier as you get older, and I think they do. Also, as you get older, when you see old guys in a locker room, you lose, muscle mass in your thighs. So, your balls are like when your legs get skinnier, your balls are right there, and there's no thigh fat for them to get hung up on. They're just dangling out there. Um, so your balls are more apparent and droopier. And then our director had a question. Um, Unfortunately, our director lost a couple family members to COVID this past week. And our director was asking, well, how do you get COVID? What are the actual mechanics of it? And, we've learned a lot more in the 6-7 months since we first started really getting hit with it. And like, remember at the beginning, everybody was like wiping everything down because we thought surfaces might be the main way it got transmitted, and we were spraying everything. And turns out not so much. That COVID isn't transmitted to any great degree by surfaces. It's transmitted through droplets in the air. And the deal is that first off, COVID virus particles are kind of shitty because they're built in your own body. The deal is a virus particle injects its DNA or RNA or whatever into a cell, and then that RNA takes over the cell's, it tells the cell to build a bunch of parts. And then the parts jostle around in the cell, forming new COVID particles. And then the cell eventually blows up because it becomes too jam-packed with COVID particles. And releases all these COVID particles into your body to infect more cells. But the deal is just building shit inside your cells, and having them haphazardly come together is probably not a ticket for high quality control. So you need to inhale or get hit with you got to get about 1,000 COVID particles in your body to have a decent chance of coming down with it, because any one COVID particle isn't likely to be super effective. And so the way to get 1,000, you can be super unlucky and maybe get like 600 particles into your body in one really juicy droplet from somebody, that you happen to just walk past. But that's a super unlikely event. It's more likely that you're going to inhale a few particles at a time or a few dozen particles at a time via an extended exposure to a source of particles. Say somebody else who's infected. Like our director says that the family thinks that maybe came from the family's maid who was commuting from Mexico and then coming up, during the week to I guess be a live-in maid, and may have had it asymptomatically. So yeah, if somebody in your household has the stuff, you're more likely to get it from somebody. If you're not, because most people when you get home you take off the masks. So if somebody in your household has it, nobody is masking up inside the house, then you're likely to, share a bunch of breaths with that person. And, get it, with 20 COVID particles at a time. After 50 breaths, you're looking at, inhaling, a decent number of particles. Is that a reasonable understanding of, what might be going on? All right, so our director just asked, do I think if the Trump rallies are infecting a lot of people? And so I'd say they're not infecting no people. If you've got 2,000 people that spending 2 hours at a rally, today's rally in Nevada was inside. So if you're 2.5 hours inside, and then if you're waiting to go in in a crowd of hundreds and thousands of people outside for another 3 hours, and you guys aren't social distancing, and you don't have masks on, and people breathe about 15 times a minute, there's ample opportunity for people to share a lot of breaths. So somebody estimated that out of 1,000 people, say at a Trump rally, there might be 80 cases shared. There might be 80 new cases coming out of that. And then at 2 to 3% mortality, you're looking at maybe 2 dead people out of 1,000. And that doesn't include the people who didn't go to the rally but get infected by people who did go to the rally. So the way they're doing the rallies, I'd say that not everybody's going to get infected, but somewhere a little less than 10% of everybody at the rally has, might be a reasonable estimate, but I don't really know. But that seems ballparky. Of course, people have to be infected to share the infection, but out of 1,000 people, and we know that 2% of the U.S. population has now been confirmed to have had it or have it now. And then there are a bunch of people who, in America, maybe another couple percent, who have it, but we don't know they have it. So out of 1,000 people, or I'd say out of 2,000 people, if 1.5% of those people have it, that's 30 people at the rally with it. Well, actually, you can knock that down a little bit, because out of the 30 people, like some people know for sure they've got some shit and they won't go to the rally. So you're looking at not, so I don't know, maybe 20 people out of 2,000 might have it.
Since March, I've been telling people that there are medications out there. The first one I mentioned was hydroxychloroquine with zinc and azithromycin. They now have ivermectin, budesonide, something called, I think, dexamethasone. And whenever I find out about people getting these things, I always ask, did they take any of these medications? And the answer is no. So my feeling is that we have to go back to normalcy. We have to go back to where, see, I'm of a different school of thought. I don't think that you lock down the United States for the minority that are possibly going to get sick. I think that the minority that's possibly going to get sick has to lock themselves down, and the rest of the country has to go back to their lives. That is, their business, associating with others. I've never experienced anything like this, and I don't want this to be the new norm. But I've also said from the very beginning that I believe in these medications. And so my argument has been and will continue to be that we need to make these medications widespread. It'll probably only be 6 weeks before we have what's the word for it?
Vaccine?
A vaccine. Thank you, Rick. That's how old I'm getting. I probably am vulnerable to COVID. Anyway, so what I'm saying is, until we have the vaccine, we need to use the medications that we know are roughly 50% to 70% effective. There was a new article by the Yale virologist, Dr. Risch, and he released it this week, and he said that, look, we're now getting study upon study upon study of hydroxychloroquine and zinc. And this week there was another study, and he said, look, it's not going to cure it the way penicillin cures syphilis. It's going to be at least 50% effective, and yet nobody's taking it. We have remdesivir. We have the antibody thing that Rick said they're, maybe not as effective, but we do have at least half a dozen medications now, and nobody's taking it. And I would like to
Okay,
say
hold
this.
on, hold on. That's ridiculous. You go to the hospital with this shit. The doctors are going to give you, there are about close to 20 different drugs that have been shown to have some degree of it, or at least have been studied for their efficacy in addressing
You're
coronavirus.
interrupting me.
You go to a
You're
hospital.
interrupting.
What?
You're interrupting me. You're
Yeah, but I'm
interrupting me.
saying that it's you don't go to a hospital and they don't give you anything. They give you the shit that they think will work the best given your particular set of
Yeah,
circumstances.
that's because you're ignorant, Rick. There are doctors that are having their licenses revoked for giving hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah, but there
And
are
that,
18 other fucking drugs to give that are
yeah,
just as
Rick,
effective, if not more effective. They're
no,
going to give
no,
you a
no.
drug.
Are we interrupting tonight, Rick?
I don't know, but you're saying that
No,
people,
no, I can
you're
see the
claiming that people go to the hospital and they don't get given drugs, which is fucking crazy.
Rick.
Go
I,
ahead.
I, Rick, let's make a rule, no interrupting, okay? Now,
Maybe.
I am certain that there are doctors that are having their licenses revoked for using hydroxychloroquine. And there are, even now, right now as we speak. So that has dampened the medical establishment's enthusiasm for using hydroxychloroquine. Now, my point is this. We have a medication, hydroxychloroquine and several others, that are at least 50% effective if the person treated arrives there on the 5th day of symptoms. But what is happening is this. We're using Bronze Era technology. We're using masks and distance. So, Rick, don't interrupt me because I'm going to make an important point. I've wondered why the disease is not going away. It keeps going down. There's no doubt that it's going down, but it's lingering tenaciously. And I think it's because the Democrats out there want us to use distance and masks. So you have to stay 6 feet away from people. You can't congregate in groups, and you have to wear masks. Now, oh yeah, and we're waiting for a vaccine. That's basically what the Democrats are doing. That's what the governor of California is doing. That's what all the press that criticize hydroxychloroquine are doing. Budesonide works, that we're not using that. So what's happening is the Democrats are on the side of just Bronze Age technology, distance, and double masks, and waiting. The Republicans, on the other hand, are saying, look, ask your doctor to provide you with hydroxychloroquine, try and get the remdesivir, try and use budesonide, ivermectin, and in every case, it's the Republicans saying to do this, so you don't just wait for Bronze Age technology to save you. But I have news for you, Rick. The Democrats don't believe in science. What they believe in is waiting and hoping that staying away from people will save us. And I'm astounded that in the 21st century we're using biblical era technology. That's all I have to say.
All right. So, I mean, a lot of that is retarded. All the drugs are roughly in the 30% effective range. And the way to tell how effective they are is you look at the number of Americans dying from COVID every day. And we're still running 800 to 1,200 U.S. dead a day. And these are people who went to the hospital. Probably most of these people died in a hospital. Where you go and they will give you drugs based on the drugs they think will help you at whatever point in disease in the disease you're at. So the drugs that you're listing don't stop people from dying. They may stop some people from dying, but we still are getting roughly 1,000 dead a day in America.
Yeah, and we're not giving people hydroxychloroquine and zinc.
Yeah, but a bunch of studies have shown that hydroxychloroquine and zinc, at best, are roughly as effective as any of these other drugs. I mean, there are given some specific situations, hydroxy might be more effective than other drugs, but it's not a global cure. It's generally effective only for people at a certain point in the disease, and there are more than a dozen other drugs to give to people, depending on where they're at in the disease, and people who get treated are still dying. So, all right, so that's thing one. Thing two is all the countries that locked it down, for the most part, like New Zealand was very effective. They were lucky because it took a long time for the shit to get to New Zealand, because it's on the other side of the world from fucking everything. But by the time it got there, they knew what to do, which is contact tracing, masks, and social distancing. And they did all that shit, and they shut it down. And then when New Zealand or when Spain or France gets an outbreak, it's like 19 people. When South Korea gets an outbreak, it's like 20 people. And they're able to contact trace off of all those people, isolate them, and get it shut down again after a day or two. And, you know, we've been doing, it is crazy because we've been locked down for 6 months. But we've learned how to lock down without locking down. The deal is, you know, I can go out and I don't shit my pants every time I go out. I just wear a mask. I stay the fuck away from people, you know, especially like half maskers with their nose sticking out. You know, I practice precautions, but I can still go out. You know, I'm not going to share an office with people for 8 hours a day, but I can go to the grocery and grab a couple things, or to fucking Popeyes and get chicken. And people can do a lot of things we used to do in the before times while wearing masks and social distancing. And it sucks, but if we're not going to get everybody to do it, if we're not going to, you know, because the way to really shut it down is to really hardcore social distance, shut it down for 2-3 weeks. Because if people can't, even, you know, even at home, I don't know, but just if we can shut down transmission for 3 weeks, then you see the rate super drop, and then shit can open up again. We've been half-assing it for 6 months, closing down here and there, halfway closing down, other people defiantly not closing down. If you look at the footage from the Trump rallies, there's fewer than 5% of the people are wearing masks, and there's no social distancing. You look at various colleges, and depending on the culture on campus, or, you know, in a frat or whatever, you're going to get people just fucking around and not shutting it down. You're going to get like upsurges. And with the vaccine, like saying we're going to have a vaccine in 6 weeks is believing Trump. I'd rather believe Fauci when he says that we're looking at the middle of 2021. Maybe he's too pessimistic, but 6 weeks is crazily unrealistic. It's just super unrealistic. It just is Trump trying to say we're going to have a vaccine before Election Day. Not going to happen. I'll bet you $1,000 or even $2,000 that we don't have a mass distributed vaccine by Election Day. And when we do have it, it might only be 50% effective, and it'll take a while to, you know, vaccinate enough people, then revaccinate people, because it didn't work because a lot of vaccination. I'm halfway through my shingles vaccine. I got the first shot a few weeks ago, and now I have to wait in sometime in the next 6 months. I have to go back for part 2. And they're saying that might be the same deal with the corona vaccine, where you get it once and then you wait a week or two and you get the booster, and only then are you at maximum resistance to the stuff. So given all the logistics, and that it's 2021 before we have a vaccine.
All right, well, listen, I don't know if our audience is tired of us repeating the same thing every week. I feel like we kind of are, and I'd like to move on to a different subject.
Okay, so
Do
let's
you have
do
anything
that.
else?
No,
All
let's
right.
go on. I mean, well,
All
there is the related thing where Trump had 18 little interviews with Bob Woodward,
right.
and Bob Woodward tapes all his interviews. So in this past week, it came out that Trump told Bob Woodward back in February that COVID is 5 times more deadly than a bad flu. That he told Woodward that it's passed on through the air, that is via breathing. And so he knew all this shit, even as he told America not to freak out about it and that it wasn't very dangerous. And he poo-pooed masks. And so, in my media, you're going to say my media is the one who freaked out about Trump on tape saying this shit. But sure, call it my media and say there was a lot of freaking out about it. But Trump lied to America about what he knew.
All right, my response is required, I suppose, and I've listened to his response, and they asked him, they said, why didn't you say this in February? And he said, well, he didn't want to panic people, which to me doesn't seem like a terribly unreasonable thing. And I'll tell you why. I was alive in February, and I remember when people first started talking about it. And I remember there was a big response to H1N1, the swine flu. There was a big response to Ebola. Then there was Zika, the one that was spread by mosquitoes. And I know for a fact that there were those 3 and maybe a couple more scares that have gone back every year, where people thought that there was some disease coming up. I remember even there was a killer bee scare coming up from South America.
Murder wasps.
No, but there was a bee scare too.
Okay.
And in every case, the disease, either they found a cure for it quickly, or even though it was incredibly dangerous, it just sort of petered out. It never really took hold. And I remember thinking at the time that they started to talk about this coronavirus that it would probably be just like the others. And the truth is that as angry as the media wants to make us at Trump, I just can't get that angry because I would also be blaming myself. I knew roughly the same thing that Trump did at the time. I knew in early March that it was more dangerous than the flu. I mean, we may have even argued whether it was 4 times more dangerous or 8 times more dangerous. And that was one of our big arguments. I think there was a thing about how 1 out of 1,000 people die of flu, but maybe 10 people out of 1,000 die of corona, of the Wuhan virus. So we had all these things, and I remember, and I hate having to do this, but it backs up my point, an argument against interest. I did say that I didn't think it had hit 20,000. So I was wrong there, and because I wasn't taking it that seriously. And by the way, everyone was comparing it to H1N1, and as I argued in one of our previous shows, I don't think we really know how many people died of H1N1. To be honest with you, I think the swine flu We stopped counting at around 12,000, as we recall.
12,469.
Yeah, so it might have been much more. Might have been 30,000.
No, it wasn't. No.
No, but we don't know, Rick, because we stopped counting. The Obama administration told the CDC to stop counting.
Yeah,
And
because it was waning.
no, they told him to stop counting because the only reason they were counting was to see if it was a pandemic. And once it reached the level of pandemic, the Obama administration said, well, we don't need to keep those kinds of numbers anymore. We just have to do whatever we're going to do to treat it. But my point is that if I was president and I knew that there was some odd new strain of virus coming in from China, like it does every year or every other year, I wouldn't have panicked either. I would not have gotten on the TV and said, look, this is coming from China. It's already probably here. It's 5 times, 20 times more dangerous than the flu. It's airborne. Once you got it, we have no cure. Your lungs will collapse in a horrible, painful death. I wouldn't have done all that. I would have done exactly what, and in fact, I wouldn't have even done what he did, which was quarantine China and quarantine Europe. I mean, that was we'd never done anything before like that in my lifetime. So I thought, wow. I mean, he's really reacting to this. But that was when there was only 1 or 2 cases in the United States. So instead of getting on the TV and describing that, we're basically all doomed and that there are predictions that 2 million Americans will die, he just quarantined China and Europe, which I think is what a reasonable president would do.
Okay, so I'll tell you what my media plus Twitter tells me, which is, one thing is that he likes panicking us about other shit, like, Mexicans coming over the border, caravans. I mean, he doesn't hesitate the end of the suburbs if Biden gets elected. So I've seen that tweet, 500 times in the past week that, yeah, he didn't want to panic us about this shit, but he'll panic us about every other thing. And thing 2, I guess, is...
Wait, do you want me to respond to thing 1? Because if you're going to give me a list, I can respond to each one at a time.
There's only 2 points. The other point is, a little bit of panic might have been, to the point where, there's still a difference between Trump people and liberals about wearing masks, where I've seen the tweet, I've seen the arguments about wearing masks as it's living under tyranny, that it makes you a pussy. So like he could have, early on, eventually he started wearing a mask sometimes, but for 2 months, for 10 weeks, he didn't wear a mask. He didn't really push masks. And the masks, you call it Bronze Age technology, but they're really a big deal when it comes to slowing the shit down. You don't like them, but if you had a choice between the country being locked down and no masks, or people wearing masks a lot and people being able to go about their business, I think you would take masks. So, a little bit of concern to the point where people feel okay about wearing masks would have done a lot. All right.
My response to that one is that Dr. Fauci at that point was telling people not to wear masks. So
but it took a long. We knew that masks were effective long before Trump admitted they were effective.
Okay, listen to me. I can't respond to 100 points.
All right.
We're talking about early February. In early February, Dr. Fauci and the CDC were saying that masks were not effective. Later, Fauci admitted that he lied because he didn't want to run on masks. He didn't want everyone to buy all the masks. So, all right, that's the first thing. As far as he panics us about other things, well, yeah, because his Twitter feed is the only thing we've got. The entire mainstream media is saying the exact opposite of what Republicans believe. The reason that he tries to panic us about illegal immigration, about mail-in voting leading to chaotic polls, a variety of other issues is because the mainstream media keeps lying about them, and so it's just him against them. So if Trump wants to tell people, look, we've got to cut down on illegal immigration, he's got to fight the CNN, ABC, the networks, all the newspapers who are saying illegal immigrants are noble people, worthy of bring in as many as you can. So yeah, the guy tries to stick up for what he's saying. So on that note, I'd like to change subjects for my weekly question to Rick.
Okay, there's something Trump did that was good that my media didn't tell me about. I read up on Serbia, Kosovo, by the way, a little bit more.
Oh, okay. So let me ask you a question, Rick. Since your media is continuously lying to you, lying by admission, did Trump do anything good this week that comes to mind?
Well, I'm more interested in the shitty stuff he does, but so no, nothing comes to. I mean, he continues to push his prescription plan, but I don't think you're talking about that. So all right.
No.
Okay.
Actually, I would like to mention that today he did sign. I mentioned this a few weeks ago, but he's the first president in history to insist that America have the same price for drugs that every other country is charged by our pharmaceutical companies. So as a result, the price of drugs is going to fall dramatically in the United States. It'll rise in other countries around the world to compensate. Middlemen like insurance companies are going to be aced out. And he signed that today. It goes into effect because the pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies couldn't come back with a counter offer. So that was his compromise, was he gave them until today to come up with something. They didn't. So now, Rick, because of Trump, drug prices, prescription drug prices are going to fall, which is a dramatic victory for the American people in their health care. You heard nothing about that, or you did. You brought it up yourself, so you heard a little something about it.
Yeah, and I heard about what if we break. I'm going to go read up to see if what I'm going to read some analysis real quick and see if it's really going to work that well. Because some of the stuff
I'm sure the Democrats will tell you it's not going to work out.
Well, what I like to do is find conservative sources that say that aren't entirely beholden to Trump, but are going to be. I don't want to hear pure. There's a thing on Twitter called Orange Man Bad, and it goes along with TDS, which is Trump Derangement Syndrome, and the deal is that anything that goes on with Trump, according to under that umbrella. Well, these are conservative terms thrown at liberals, but still, I don't want to see shit that just says that whatever Trump does is bad because Trump did it. I want to see analytics that are reasonably unbiased, like with the Serbia-Kosovo treaty. I read an analysis from the Kosovars Um, and what I took away from that, I think I mean, well, any party to the treaty, the Kosovo and Serbia gives more of a shit about the treaty than we do. And they're going to be cranky about it because nobody's happy with a treaty. It's compromised, but this one writer from Kosovo was saying that it's really a laundry list of shit that had already been agreed to between the two countries, and that it's really a gift to American evangelicals because part of the treaty says that Serbia and Kosovo have to agree that their embassies move to their Israeli embassies move to Jerusalem, and which evangelicals like in America. So I don't know that.
Well, you're Jewish. Do you like that our embassy is going to move to Jerusalem?
I don't fucking care. I mean,
Well, I don't know. I don't care if you care. Do you think it's a good idea?
I'm not informed enough to know whether it's a good idea or not. I know it's part of kind of end times politics where there's a certain amount of shit that is foretold in the Bible. And so that needs to happen in the world before Jesus finally comes. And I know that a lot of American evangelicals want to move that shit along, and that this somehow is tied up in that.
So you think that the people of Israel, the 6 million Israeli citizens, most of whom are Jews that want this, are conspiracy theory?